what do you think the Twins are going to do with Byron Buxton, a guy that you know pretty well as you spent a lot of time with him? Do you think that he will end up getting traded? And do you think that Byron will waive a no trade clause to a number of teams based on where the team's at right now? I'm hitting you with something hard to start because I want people to know we're bringing it today.
Byron is such a unique player. I think keep in mind, guys, that one of the mentors he had, the captain who preceded him, was Joe Mauer. Joe Mauer played his entire career in Minnesota. Joe Mauer, who I know definitively because we offered to him at the end of his career the chance to go play wherever he wanted to. Derek Falvey, myself, ownership was very supportive of that. Joe decided to stay in Minnesota. He felt a bond to that community. He never wanted to turn his back on that fan base. And I think Byron is wired in some similar fashions. Last trade deadline, I think he made a very bold statement to the media in which he said definitively he was not going to be traded. He was going to stay with Minnesota. So while he is desirous of winning a championship, I think he primarily would like to do that in Minnesota. So I think the question remains, will Derek Falvey, will now skipper Derek Shelton sit down with him? Will they convince him that they're going to be competitive and competitive soon? And if so, I would expect Byron Buxton will want to be part of that. He's going to want to deliver a championship as best he can to the Minnesota fans. If, however, they say that they're a number of years away, he may start looking elsewhere. But I think he's going to be very specific as to where he wants to look. He is from Baxley, Georgia. I think the chance to get closer to home would be very important to him. Otherwise, I would see him staying in a Minnesota Twins jersey.
Yeah, before we get into the specifics of teams and stuff, I always, when I have an opportunity to talk to someone like you, I kind of like to just know kind of what the day-to-day is like at the winter meetings for someone in your previous position. I attended for the first time last year. I spent a lot of time on the ground floor kind of walking around, but I always like to get a little insight now that I'm done playing. Do you go in with like a checklist in mind? Do you have free agents that you want to set up meetings with? Is it agents calling you? Just kind of take us into kind of the day-to-day and I guess the course of the winter meetings, how that kind of shakes out for you.
I mean, primarily we want to know if the traveling secretary has good snacks in the suite. I mean, that's kind of the focus of it. Kevin, I would say it's changed dramatically over the course of my career. When I started, I was with the Colorado Rockies. Dan O'Dowd was the general manager. And the way it started was I was literally handed a list of all the phone numbers of the other general managers. I would call all 29 rooms and try to set up individual meetings where Dan O'Dowd and his group could go sit down with them. And so there was a lot more individual engagement with teams. We would actually literally go visit with at least 20, if not all 29 other clubs. You would sit down, you'd have an open conversation about what are your needs and surpluses? How do they line up with our needs and surpluses? And are there opportunities for us to get together to make deals? I think things have changed now a little bit at the winter meetings. There's far less meeting together. There's a lot more conversations over the phone by way of text. There's a lot of stuff done leading up to the meeting. So you really are very targeted when you get to the meetings. Maybe you're only meeting with 4 or 5 clubs. It's the clubs that you see the most likelihood of getting a deal done. And then, as you guys know, there's so many agents and there's so many members of the media there that you're constantly meeting with agents, members of the media. And as the way the offseason goes, we usually start looking into free agency and trying to spend our owners' money to fill our holes. When that seems exorbitant, we go to the trade market. And then when it seems like the asking price to acquire talent is too high, we circle back to the free agent market. And so it's a constant conversation balancing between talking to agents, talking to other teams' executives to try to find out where's the best deal that we can make to try to make the biggest impact on our organization.
Yeah, I think you hit that well, man. Those things, I always thought, like when I played, I would tell my agent I was a free agent, like, just give them a price. I mean, we already know what price we're at. Just tell the team I want to go to or a team that's interested in me, it's going to be so-and-so, and let's get this ball moving. I'm sick of it. I got the holidays coming up here, but that's just not how it goes. And I kind of wish it did because I feel like more guys would either get picked up or, there'll be a little more stuff going in motion. But that's just the New
Todd,
Jersey guy in me.
I think you're talking about 2 different approaches to an agent. One you're talking to who's clearly trying to get the most money he can for the player. And I totally respect that. That's one style of negotiation. The other one is what you're talking about, which is where you're really contemplating what is the quality of life that player wants to pursue. And sometimes that's playing in a specific market. Maybe it's an opportunity to play a specific position. Maybe a guy's hunting the longest term deal rather than the most money per year. And other guys want the most money in the shorter term because they want to get back to free agency. But when you're talking to an agent, you get a clear picture right out of the chute as to what type of negotiation you're undertaking. But I honestly always felt from an executive standpoint, the more transparency, the more likely we were to get a deal done. I never took advantage of somebody if they were more willing to reveal that that player maybe really wanted to sign with you. I think a measure of a person sometimes is how do you handle leverage? And so when an agent came to us and said, hey, listen, my guy really would like to either stay with you as an existing player or come to you as a free agent, I never viewed that as a compromise on their part. That was just a reveal, and I appreciated their honesty. You still want to treat the player extremely fairly in that situation because the relationship is with the player moving forward. And if he doesn't realize in the moment that you took advantage of him, he certainly will over time. He will be disinclined to ever re-sign with you, and his agent will be disinclined to do business with you in the future. So I think the integrity of the agent starts that conversation when he reveals that the player maybe wants to return to the team or join that team. The integrity then shifts to the general manager in that instance to handle that situation responsibly and still treat the player very fairly in the process.
Yeah, on topic with that, because baseball is the only sport where kind of free agency drags out over the entire offseason. Give me your perfect scenario, things that could be implemented. Obviously, things have to be collectively bargained, but how do we get free agency moving quicker? How is it putting a deadline on, free agents or trades or certain things? How do you see us as an industry making baseball free agency exciting and quick? And then obviously, there's going to be some guys who linger, but let's get the majority of these guys signed so fans can get excited about these new players. Players can get acclimated. They can meet their teammates. As a player, I always felt like, my first couple of years when I was with Toronto, I always worked out with this mindset that I was improving to help my team. It got harder for me when I was always a free agent and I was out there. I'm like, what am I training for? Like, obviously, I want to be the best version of myself, but I like this collective approach that, like, man, I want to call one of my teammates and be like, hey, did you get in the gym today? Did you hit? Did you do this? It sucked, when you had to wait till, middle of February to sign.
Well, and Kevin, I'll add a few things to your comments, which I think are spot on. Is when we're signing a guy like you or we're signing a guy like Todd, part of it is because of the leadership, the experience you have, the championship pedigree. So if you are coming on board February, week before spring training, you're not able to really spread your knowledge and your wisdom to as many guys and have as big of an impact. And also, my guess is you guys find that very fulfilling to help mentor guys. And if we're saying you can only start that process when you meet them in spring training, we're missing an opportunity. Another thing I would just add to the conversation is the fact that every club is investing so much in their spring training facilities. I think a lot of you guys now are coming down well in advance of spring training to work out there because the facilities are just so great. And so we're depriving you of the ability to get down there and also get to know some of your teammates, some of your coaches, some of the resources that will be around you. You're getting to know that as spring training begins, or dare I say now, a lot of guys who are signing well into spring training, it's just such a disadvantage. So I think there's a real dangerous situation going on in baseball right now, which is GMs are trying to get the best deals they can. So too are agents. Agents believe if they wait longer, it'll be more deadline driven. Teams will have to capitulate and give more money. But then there's a tipping point in that. If we get past a certain date, the player and agent become a little bit compromised. And GMs now are taking advantage of that and signing guys to, kind of deflated deals late into February, sometimes March, when guys are really needing to get back into camp and get back out on the field. And so they're in a compromised position. I think it's a terrible way to start a relationship. Furthermore, we're seeing from a performance standpoint, those players are missing out on spring training. There's something to do with the at-bats you guys get, the reps you guys that get on the mound. Just again to shape, those guys aren't having great Aprils. Some of them spilling into May, and so I think we're losing across the board as an industry on all the fronts you mentioned, Kevin, and then additionally a few that I just brought up. So as a result, I love the thought of having some sort of deadline. Todd kind of referenced it. I think we should get back to the point where when you guys go and spend the holidays with your families and friends, you can tell them where you're going to play the next year and where your kids may be going to school and where you're looking for housing. So if we could somehow figure out a way, maybe it's not a hard and fast deadline too soon after the season, but surely by the end of December, we should all have a pretty good understanding of how good a fit a player is for a team and a team is for that player. if we can accelerate decisions to be made in the calendar year such that you then can spend all of January, February preparing with the team you're going to play for, ideally interacting with some of those teammates, sharing your wisdom, sharing your expertise, I think we all win from that.
How about making a deadline at the winter meetings? Like, wouldn't that be helpful for a lot of guys to, get these free agents going a little bit?
Well, Todd, that would reinvigorate the winter meetings, which right now, we don't see a ton of signings there. It would be the offseason spectacle that Major League Baseball wishes it was. We have media all over the place there trying to break news, but they're really hunting for stories, and they really are breaking a lot more rumors than they are signings. If we actually had a need to sign and agree to terms with players there, what an event that would be for Major League Baseball. It would put it on the map. Whereas right now, it's just kind of a slow bleed to get through free agency, and I don't think it captures the fans' interest like MLB would want it to.
My next question.
Hold up, real quick, because I want to jump in. Are you guys? I'm just making sure here, from the player perspective. Are you guys good with, like, KP? You're good. Everyone, like you have to sign December 8th.
No,
So all the big boys are
think
getting taken care
I
of,
don't,
and then you just get a take it or leave it offer versus doing a trade deadline at the winter meetings so that it can't be used as leverage and we can get the trade action done and then go to the signings.
I think I think it's got to be incentive driven. I don't think it's like a cutoff, like you can't sign, but maybe incentivize teams for signing players. Like maybe 90% of the deal counts against the CBT and you get a 10% discount on, luxury, something along those lines to incentivize teams where, if we're fighting over just, a year, I know a year is a lot, or, a couple $1,000,000, which sounds like a lot, but to a team, it's not that much. But like, let's get the ball moving and incentivize teams. Maybe it's a draft pick compensation if you sign a guy for X amount of years for a certain amount of dollars, whatever it may be. There's smarter people out there than me, but I think you incentivize teams and agents and players to sign by a certain date. So all those things that we talked about, being able to get in and meet your teammates and, get your family settled. As a player who signed late, it was tough, and I think about my most recent experience with the Rangers. Part of the reason I got brought in was to be kind of a veteran guy, a leader, a guy who's been there, help out some of these younger guys. And the first time I'm meeting them, it's 3 or 4 days into spring training. I didn't have a lot of time, and obviously my time was short there. I got released, a couple months into the season, but it felt like if I had an entire off season living here in Dallas, I could have commuted down to Arlington and saw the guys and worked out and got to know the staff a little bit better. Maybe things would have turned out a little bit different, but I don't think you could just put a deadline on, like, if you don't sign, you're kicked out of baseball. I think it has to be incentive driven.
Hey, how about this as an idea, guys? How about if you don't sign by a specific date, the most you can sign for is like 80% of the qualifying offer, and it could be over 2-3 years if you want to, or it could be all in 1 year. But like that's kind of now the cap
For
So
players?
if you want yeah.
But I think it's such an unrealistic ask when you're saying that. I mean, that just gives, you're coming from a longtime executive side, Thad, where that's a way for that side to squeeze guys. Like, for me, why not do the incentive side, which incentivizes teams to actually be active versus them saying, take it or leave it. If you wait until tomorrow, you're only get 80% of the qualifying offer. I just think that's a trash way to operate in a negotiation.
I'm just assuming that the guys who are positioned to make $100+ million, and are trying to eke out 110 or sign for 90, like we would, I think executives would have to come to the table much more sincerely earlier in that process, is what I would hope as well.
Do you think that the incentive side is a good idea? And would
Yes.
that side ever go for it? Okay. And
Yeah,
what about
I
the
do.
trade deadline? What about it? See, to me, I think, because I'm always trying to think that I'm not trying to play like a player agent here. I'm just trying to defend the other side a little bit. My thing is, I always try to think of what actually would get done in a negotiation, because anything that happens has to get agreed to from player and ownership side. For me, the thing that I actually think is realistic is the trade deadline, right? So on the player side, you're going to be happy with that. Players don't want to get traded in freaking February when they already think they're going somewhere and then they get moved. Wipe the trades off the board. Let the first month or so of the offseason focus on what trades can happen, and then it's done. Now you can still do signings before that, but you can only sign players to advance yourself as a team for an X amount of time period. Of course, you're going to open up trades again, but we don't get that many trades at the beginning of the season anyway. So like let's set this dead period where you can't trade players on a 40-man roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very sound concept. You know, as I said earlier, part of the reason we wait on free agency is because we have an alternative, which is going to the trade market. And part of the reason we wait on the trade market is because we have an alternative, which is free agency. So if you have tight windows in which you can only operate in one space, you're going to have to accelerate conversations in each of those spaces.
It's a good one, Scott. Because I said free agent. I meant to say trade deadline. I know that's what I came off, but this is very interesting. This should be the language and the banter back and forth with, the collective bargaining and everything else. Like, these should be the talks, and I hope that's what they're talking about. But there's other little things that they go through with.
Well, while we're at it, one more, Thad. Can we trade draft picks too? Every other league gets to do that. I'm just coming from the fan perspective. All I care about, Thad, is activity.
I've been saying it for a long time that I think it would help advance trades, and it's to my point too. Like I wanted to ask you about this too. And, the trade that happened yesterday between the Red Sox and the Pirates, but we were just talking about teams covet prospects so much that at some point you have an abundance of them and you don't have enough room for them to, fill out your major league roster. At some point you got to trade them. Like what is it, the fear of that this prospect becomes this player that you drafted, developed, and you hoped? But at some point I'd love to see teams like use their prospects and their draft picks to improve their major league roster, because ultimately that's what makes everything work. If you have a productive major league team, everything else should kind of follow.
Well, and I think both these points kind of fall under a similar umbrella for me. I would love to trade draft picks. We've talked about this as from the GM perspective at every GM meeting. I don't know why we haven't implemented that. I just strongly believe we should have every ability to try to build a championship organization. We shouldn't be restricted like we currently are. I would take a lot of the safeguards off of the draft. I would take it off of trading draft picks. I just think teams should be able to spend money where they want to spend money to try to build championship organizations. Let's let teams be as creative as possible. Let's not restrict creativity whatsoever. And then, Kevin, with regards to your point, I do think there's a little bit of that fear that prospect turns into the next role 6, role 7, role 8 player, the guy who's the perennial all-star, the guy who's the gold glover or the silver slugger. But then I also think GMs probably put a little bit too much onus on this notion of service time. And so, yesterday's trade was really fascinating because you trade a premium position player prospect who they're going to control for the next 6 years for a really solid major league starting pitcher who you can control for 2 years. And so, that is a very calculated decision on both sides' parts. And that's why Boston probably receives additional value in this deal, because they're giving up 6 years of control for 2. That's always a challenge as well, because that's how you gain cost control in the game, is for every guy you're signing to a deal that is, $15+ million, you have to have 4 to 5 guys making the major league minimum to balance out your payroll by and large. And if you have one that is competing at a very high level, they're worth so much value to the team. So there is this balancing act of like, how much of your future value are you sacrificing to try to win today? In addition, that I would just bring up is, I think so many general managers are so intelligent today, but one of the things we may be missing is just that thirst to win. And I think we all know the general managers who are super aggressive out there, who are willing to trade those prospects in the name of trying to win today. I think there are more general managers out there who want to play it safe and want to keep their prospects for the future, to give a chance to win in the future. They're not necessarily willing to forego the chance to win today. I think there's a little bit of an imbalance in the general managers today. When I started in the game, the average GM was kind of the Kevin Towers, Dave Dombrowski, Jim Hendry types of guys, Omar Minaya, Jim Bowden. These guys were going for it all the time, and they wore that on their sleeves. Now I think guys are a lot more reserved about that, and they're playing for, not only for tomorrow, but they're also playing for 3, 5, 10 years down the road. I think we need some more general managers with a little bit more short-term goals to be able to drive some of those types of deals. Otherwise, they're going to hold on to those prospects in the name of trying to win down the road.
Preach that. That last part was money right there. Last question for me. I'm going to shift gears here. Ron Washington, what do you think he's been around the block. He's been everywhere. He's well loved. What do you think he'll bring to the Giants moving forward here?
Yeah, Todd, I'm glad you brought up. He is one of my biggest friends and mentors in the game. Just a spectacular human being. Anyone who's touched this guy knows that he just loves the game of baseball at such a high level. He's not a glass half full guy. He's the water's brimming over. He is tremendous. I've never seen a guy who has the impact he has on the morale of a team. Just nobody was ever down when Wash was in the clubhouse. He genuinely believed and he espoused when he was the manager of the Texas Rangers, give us the AA roster tonight. We're going to kick somebody's butt. And that's basically what he said. Never once in his tenure with the Rangers did he ever come up to me or John Daniels and say, hey, this guy can't play here or he's not good enough. He always embraced the best that every player had to offer and put them in the ultimate position to succeed. In addition to that, guys, I think he's the best infield guy I've ever been around. I've heard great things about Perry Hill and a few guys, but he was the best guy I've ever witnessed. He's a great base running guy, tremendous third base coach. I know he won't be doing that for the Giants. But in today's day and age, I'm not sure how many competitive advantages you get from your working coaches. You unequivocally do that from Wash. You see how he's impacted every team's defense that he has been part of. You know, Marcus Simeon, Eric Chavez, Oz Albies, all of these guys give him so much credit for becoming the Gold Glove players that they became. And I think on top of that, he's just such a effervescent, spectacular human. So the San Francisco Giants obviously have a very good left side of the infield. You've got Rafael Devers potentially moving to first base. What better guy to come in and not only make him an average first baseman, but if there's anybody out there who can make him an above average first baseman, it would be Wash. One of their best prospects, Eldridge, is going to be coming up at some point soon. Wash will help him. Yet to be determined what they're going to do at second base. He's also going to help the veterans on the left side. Chapman's obviously a perennial Gold Glove. Adames, solid above average defender at short, but he's going to help those guys. I think he's going to help the guys in the field. He's going to also help the swagger and attitude in the clubhouse. This is a guy who believes he is going to be a champion every time he sets foot on the field. It exudes to all the players around him. He is going to be a huge advantage for the San Francisco Giants.
All right, last one for me too. Rockies kind of went out and made let's just call it an interesting hire. What are the Rockies kind of building with who they brought in?
So, you know, Paul is a exceptionally intelligent individual. He and I happened to grow up in the same neighborhood, played high school baseball against each other. So I've known him for quite some time. You know, I think he gets a lot of credit and credit deserved for being on the advent of bringing analytics into baseball. He had a great career in baseball, then left to spend 10 years in the NFL. So I think he comes back to baseball even more polished. He's got some additional ideas he's going to have about building a championship team. As you guys know, playing in Colorado is probably the biggest Rubik's Cube in all of professional sports, trying to help turn altitude from what is now one of the biggest deterrents to the biggest competitive advantages. And if someone can figure that out, that team has a chance to have a tremendous run, because I think people will be very concerned about having to go play there, especially in playoff type settings. So I think Paul is an extremely intelligent guy. No stone will be left unturned. He's going to be researching altitude from every single angle. And then he partners up with a guy named Josh Burns, who has had a tremendous career in the game. Another good friend of mine, Josh and I went to college together, played baseball in college together, and he got me my first job working for the Colorado Rockies. Josh has been a general manager twice over. He's been to the World Series 8 times. He has won 4 of them, 1 with the Red Sox, 3 with the Dodgers. He's been instrumental in building out the player development and amateur scouting side for the Dodgers. He's going to bring that knowledge and acumen to the Colorado Rockies. I think the Rockies are in great hands right now. Now the question is, what additional changes are they able to make, and how will they invest in the players and staff on the field to complement what Josh and Paul are doing in the front office?